but you have to spend the majority of your time, and when you become a member of Congress, you spend a lot of time trying to raise money for your campaigns. Yes, Lee Zeldin's got a lot of money, and we certainly, after the primary and when the general comes around, certainly, hopefully, there'll be more money would be coming from strong Democratic supporters. But the problem is right now it's very hard to raise funds, and you're spending an awful lot of time, making phone calls day after day. So we certainly need to make changes in that.
And even after you win, you're already fundraising already. So you're not legislating, you're not writing bills, you're fundraising for your next election cycle. So yes. Anybody else? Harry.
So my campaign has raised $1.4 million so far, and fundraising is important. In an ideal world, we have public financing, and we have a system where the Democrat and the Republican are on equal footing, and how much money you raise doesn't matter. But in order for us to get change, we have to get into office. And Lee Zeldin has $1.5 million cash on hand right now. Whoever we nominate has got to be able to raise money in order to launch a campaign against Zeldin and effectively get our message out. And all of this doesn't even mention the external money that's going to come in, the NRA money that's going to come in to support Zeldin, and the NRA money that's going to come in to attack whichever one of us wins. So money raising is important, and I don't know how else to put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. Okay, David?
Yeah, so I'm in third right now in terms of the amount of money raised among us, and I feel good about our position. We're going to have the resources we need to win the primary. We have an incredibly motivated young team around me. It's a true grassroots campaign, as I said, not taking money from wealthy interests. And in terms of the general, I mean, the candidate, this is a race of national importance. This is a race that's going to get attention all over the country. So if the candidate is strong, I will be a strong candidate. I will be a candidate that attracts money from all over the country. And I'm very confident that I'll have the resources I need to beat Lee Zeldin.
Thank you, David. Elaine?
Lee Zeldin's volunteers submitted 7,500 signatures for his ballot. The people at this table collectively submitted over 13,000, and Brendan Henry raised another 1,000 signatures for his ballot. We nearly doubled it. Compare that to 2016, when the turnout for this race was less than 10% of all the registered Democrats turned out for the primary. We are doing a really important service, knocking on all these doors. I don't see that there's any ego involved in what we are putting ourselves through to inspire our volunteers to knock on 14,000 doors so that we will get that vote out. And at $1 per signature, I know I did real well.
Again, please try to keep the question pointed and short. Thank you.
As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I'm of the opinion that many of our school shootings, sexual harassment, rape, porn, prostitution, drug addiction, suicides, many of our social ills are actually tied to childhood sexual abuse. And I'm wondering if any of you would be willing to sponsor legislation to use the civil rights laws to overcome state statutes of limitation by ensuring that on the federal level, the victims will be allowed to pursue the case as long as they live.
Thank you. We're kind of lost the order, so anybody, Kate, you want to take it? He wants to basically eliminate the statute of limitations on that, so at the federal level.
Okay, I can say me too. This is a very hard thing to talk about, but, sorry. But absolutely, especially in our churches. That's where there is a debate here in the state, where not just the church is fighting the issue, but insurance companies are fighting against it. As a legislator, because of my personal experience, I introduced some of the toughest sex offender legislation. And I think that that's something that we need to do on a federal level, is to make sure we have tough sex offender legislation. And certainly there should be 0 statute of limitations. I was 14. And it's very hard when me and my sisters had to come forward and talk about it. We were adults, so there should absolutely never be a statute of limitations.
Thank you, Kate. Wayne?
Let me just appreciate the courage of the folks who have been harmed and can speak out about it. There's no question that there's a lot of harm done and a true lack of justice. And the real injustice is that the state-by-state laws here vary in an arbitrary way, so that in New York, you must still effectively be a minor to be able to get yourself to a place where you can prosecute, but next door in New Jersey, you have the rest of your life. That has to end, so I actually would work on this statute and have done a little bit of inquiries into other laws locally with the groups here who take care of women and children's issues in the community.
Thank you, Elaine. Karen?
We are one nation, and it's important that a lot of our laws cover the United States in general and not state by state. And this is a great example of one such instance. We have a national speed limit. We have a national drinking age. So, and it overrides state laws. So there's no reason why we shouldn't have a national statute of limitations.
Thank you, Karen.
We certainly must have no statute of limitations for someone who has been a victim of sexual attack or childhood sexual abuse. Because very often the person is so psychologically scarred that it takes many, many years before he or she has the courage to speak up and to face the accuser. So we can't limit that right for anyone because it is a scar that's left forever.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay, we're, there, I'm sorry.
Thank you for your courage in speaking up, and Kate, also want to recognize your courage. And, it's a very hard thing. Yes, I mean, I'm with you, no statute of limitations. I also think your point about the impact of abuse and what it does to people, and I certainly never would want to stigmatize victims of abuse, but we do know that the record that if you've been abused as a child, often that leads to acts of violence later in life. I had a close friend who was murdered. It came out in the trial that the guy who murdered her had been a victim of child abuse. So we must take this issue with utmost seriousness, and thank you again for raising it, and I support you.
Thank you, David. Okay, we're actually a little bit past our scheduled time. I'd like to ask, there's a bunch of people that would like to ask questions. Could you stay a little bit longer? I'm going to, timekeeper, you're doing a great job. I'm going to mix it up on you, though. I'm going to make it 1 minute now, the response, okay? But before we do that, actually, I'd like to just thank everybody at the table here. David Paczynski, Kate Browning, Amy Grassi, Carrie Grissom, and Vivian Gloria Fisher. Thank you for your being here tonight and talking to us and giving us answers to questions. So with that, we're going to just do a little, I guess, lightning round here. We'll do some quick questions, but please keep them quick.
Thank you very much. I first want to say thank you all for this tonight. This is really what we need, and we need going forward as well, to bring transparency to everyone as well, and what your issues are. With that being said, I do have a two-part question. I'll try to keep it short. Okay. Everyone is aware of what is happening around the nation with minorities and issues that are going on with injustices and so forth, or questions of why things are happening, mostly with people of color. And I have two problems with two people in the minority section that are being left out. which is, number one, the physical challenged population. There are things that are happening to them as well that ever since the ADA Act of 1990, still to this day, with infrastructure and on train stations and buses, this minority is not being treated fairly in the process of the railroad stations, let's say. They do not have an elevator. If they get to one station, they don't have another station to get down from. So it's not being brought up in a federal level or state level as it should be. That's just one of the issues. And the other person of color would be the Native Americans. I would like to know what your commitment is going forward to bring more awareness of our First Nation people and regarding the issues that they have throughout this country, injustices that are happening, and the treaties as well. That's the first part. The second part is no, I know. Is it right? Well, I know, it was part B. I think this is important, right? It all kind of ties in. Everyone here has said that they're committed to climate change and with the environment. So if that is the case, Native Americans on the reservations are the ones that are being persecuted with pipelines and infrastructure and everything going on right now. What is your commitment then to the environment and to Mother Earth? If in these reservations, how that will be addressed going forward?
Thank you. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, I just want to say that, you know, I mentioned a vote that I took in support of immigrants. It was labeled as a consumer law. When I was walking out of that auditorium, people turned to me and called me a spick. And my life was threatened. So it wasn't a consumer law. So I know about discrimination from a personal point of view. And certainly I would support the rights of people who have special needs and the rights of the indigenous peoples of this country.
Thank you, Vivi. David?
I'm not jumping in. Thank you for your question. I mean, I think there needs to be greater honesty about the violence that's been done to indigenous people. Also, the violence that's been done to black people. And it's got greater honesty about the history of this country, the history of racial violence and racial discrimination. And if we don't have that honesty, we're not going to fix the problem. And we know that the things that that criminal justice system and so all these kinds of discrimination, they go together with environmental injustice. Right, and so I appreciate that question. And same way for people with disabilities. That one, the excuses, it's also, sort of being honest about. But on the MTA, for example, the excuse is money. Well, I'll go back to my point. If we would cut the so-called Pentagon defense budget, we would have the money to make those stations ADA accessible, and not be like, oh, there's a 30-year plan. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, David.
Former school bus driver. I drove children with disabilities, and so I'm very much aware of a lot of the discrimination that goes on and how people look at them. Again, coming from the north of Ireland, Irish Catholic, we were second-class citizens in my own country. So I will never subscribe to discriminating against anyone and making sure that everyone is respected, whether they're disabled, minorities, or LGBT community. We need to make sure that everybody is treated equally.
Thank you, Kate. Lynn?
The question really zeroed in on the most invisible of groups, and we have to work so that no group can be invisible. And the way to do that is to be proactive in knowing when laws are helping us make those intersections between different groups. That a tide of equality should lift every group, so we have to work extra hard not to let any group be invisible. And with regarding the pipelines, we just have to get the money out of those corrupt places, because there's so much money in the oil that the media blackout is very easy for those people to do. And we can't let that happen.
Thank you, Elaine. Eric?
I'm going to agree with the responses here. I think all of the candidates had great responses. But let me just change it a little bit. What we need right now, more than we need new laws, is enforcement of the laws we have. We have regulations on the books to protect handicapped people. And we have the Americans for Disability Act. And the Trump administration is weakening those regulations. They're taking away the protections that have been legislated over many, many years. And we have to reverse that. We need to do something about enforcement and regulation and make sure that the regulations on the books are enforced and not taken away. That's the first step.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, we're going to try to get a couple more questions in here. I'm going to have to put a 30-second time limit on the question just because I want to get everybody in. It's nothing against any of the questions that were asked before, but in fairness, that's how we want to do it. So, if you're up for the challenge, come on up.
Okay, condensed version. Can you tell us what you would support in terms of doing something about the problem of mass incarceration of people of color?
Thank you. Very good question. David, why don't we just go this way?
Thank you for your question. We need to get rid of discriminatory laws and not have there's been a long history, right, where we know that white and black people use drugs in equal numbers, but black people end up being in prison for them. We need to get rid of all that. I'm against the death penalty. We know that's discriminatory as well. We need to end the system of mass incarceration. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Kate?
Okay. Very quickly, when I was a legislator, working with the sheriff to make sure that we reduced the size of the jail that was being imposed and being mandated. And that's one of the things that we need to do. Jails don't rehabilitate people, programs do. So we need more programs, and we need to basically bolster up our probation department, make sure that our probation officers, there's an adequate amount of them to oversee and to supervise anyone who has been arrested for anything, rather than sending them to jail. Probation officers are our alternatives to incarceration, and we also need to raise the age.
Thank you, Kate. Elaine?
Number one, decriminalizing drugs, especially when they are slanted towards incarcerating people of color. Number two, the Voting Rights Act. Number three, no for-profit jails or immigrant detention centers. We know it. We know the answers. We just have to turn out and vote for these answers. We know the answers to these questions. What we have to do is to be around African American leadership and put ourselves in a position where they are leadership.
Thank you, Elaine. Barry?
I was going to say much of the same thing. We cannot have private prisons in America. That is where the Trump administration is going the wrong way. When we have abusive police departments, we need to properly investigate them. We've had some incidents in this country, and this predates Trump. And what Trump did was play on people's racism, and we have to stop that. We need to reverse the trend of Trump and have a fairer country and fairer law. And to go back to David's question, which I keep meaning to answer and never getting to, I too am against administrative warrants and administrative detainer. And that policy in Suffolk County and federally is just not right. It is unconstitutional.
Thank you, Barry. Louise?
Thanks, Perry. I'm going to start with that. I too am against the administrative warrants. You need to have a judicial warrant. I'm against the bail system as it stands, where someone can be sitting in jail because of lack of money for bail. I'm against the profiteering of the penal system, the corporatization of our penal system, and I mentioned that earlier. When I was in the legislature, I worked very hard on setting up the drug court, where people could, if it's a drug issue, then you look at rehabilitation and help. And I certainly believe in what Elaine said regarding the decriminalization of drug arrests, of drugs, because it does really focus on the minority community. And I also want to see more mental health assistance for people who are non-violent incarcerated people.
Thank you, Vivian. I'd like to get in a couple more questions, so here, we'll have the 30-second limit.
So my only issue right now is making sure that Zeldin gets out of office. So my question is, what key issue are you going to be focusing on when it comes between you and Zeldin to distinguish yourself from him and to get him out of office? What are your one or two key issues?
Okay, thank you. We'll start.
Well, I'm going to start with the gun violence in this country, because he has a 100% rating from the NRA, and I would have a 0. And I would focus on environmental issues, because that's something where all people here on Long Island believe that we have to take care of our environment. We're very sensitive and fragile. We have a very fragile ecosystem here. And then I would go to immigration, because I believe that we have to have a comprehensive immigration policy, so that we don't have people being torn apart.
Thank you, Vivian. Perry?
And jobs.
All of what Vivian said, especially guns, and especially, she didn't say it, but I think Vivian was probably thinking taxes. We need to find issues that can bring out swing voters and get them to vote for us, as well as progressives. We're all progressives, but we need to bring the swing voters to the polls. And I think guns and taxes are two of the big ones there. And I'll put up 30 seconds. The last one is Trump himself. Zeldin has tied himself so much to Donald Trump. As Kate pointed out, just this week he came out, he spoke in the House yesterday, calling for a second special counsel to investigate, essentially to investigate Mueller. He's so tied to Donald Trump that any rational person in this district has got to see it. And I think that's how we bring swing voters in too.